Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's discussion, Revising Your Business Continuity Plan with Defense in Depth. I'm Leah McLean, and I'll be your host for today's broadcast. So first, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping logistics. Everyone is currently on mute, and you will remain so throughout the recording. Please make sure you use the chat window and let us know of any audio or technical issues. If you experience any sound issues, we recommend calling in via phone instead of using your computer's audio. We will conduct 2 live polls throughout the webinar, and we'd love your participation. Throughout the webinar, please use the question feature to ask about any of the topics being discussed. We will make sure to address this during our live Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the replay will be sent to all of you post-event. And lastly, everyone who has attended today and remains on the entire duration will receive a $25 Grubhub gift card. Keep an eye out for that in your email inbox. With us today, we have our illustrious speakers, Rubrik Sales Engineering Director, Jason Cook, and Armor's own Director of Application Engineering, Ryan Clewis. Welcome. Over to you, gentlemen, to share a little bit more about yourselves.
All right, thanks, Leah. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the discussion today. Happy to be here with Jason, leading everyone through this discussion. So my name is Ryan. I've been with Armor for about 5 years, both in a product management and software engineering capacity. And so I currently manage our team that focuses a lot on our private cloud, our compliant cloud functionality. So happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Ryan. And echoing same sentiment, good morning, afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I know in the COVID era, there are a lot of choices when it comes to webinars. There's many of them happening, so we really appreciate you coming to ours. We're going to make it as informational and impactful as we possibly can for you all. So I'm Jason. I've been with Rubrik for a little over 3 years. I lead the technical sellers in the central region of the United States. Before Rubrik, I spent time in the manufacturing space at EMC Corporation, and before that, in the consulting world, doing various consulting projects around Microsoft software. I will note that pretty much in every incarnation of my background, a security as a design principle and kind of an architectural tenet has always been part of what I did and part of what the organizations that I've worked for did. So I'm really looking forward to the dialogue that Ryan and I are going to have, and I think this is going to be fun.
Great, and just a quick overview of what you'll hear from both Ryan and Jason today. They'll talk through the current challenges. They'll share advice on what to look for and building a business continuity plan. Talk a little bit about how both Armor and Rubrik work together, and then we'll go on to Q&A. But before we get started with our presentation today, let's take a quick poll. So please, we encourage you all to participate and enter in one of the following.
Interesting. Kind of a mixed bag there, but specific security needs leads the pack. Interesting results.
Absolutely. I think that'll frame up, the discussion well and gives us a good segue. So I think, starting off, Jason, I think probably looking at some of the problem statements, right? Business continuity, why is it a topic? Why do organizations care about it? And we'll focus on some specific pieces of this when we talk about defense in depth and it's a multi-layered approach and all that. But I think really business continuity, when I think about that, is, the name of the game there is making sure that your organization has a plan to, react to, operate in, and really move forward from a disaster, should an unfortunate event like that happen to your business. And so really, it's an organization-wide effort because, we talk about tools and technology that are a part of solving that strategy or navigating that strategy. And it's a big component of it, right? Protecting our data, ensuring availability and all that. But it truly is an organization-wide approach. And we could spend, many sessions going through all those pieces, and we'll touch on some of that kind of top to bottom of how you go about putting a plan like that together. But, tools and technology are a part of that, like I said. So we'll spend some time kind of digging into that today. And, disaster can come in different forms. It can be accidental, right? There's human nature involved. And so things that were just unforeseen. There can be, a cyber threat of some kind. We saw security top of mind for a lot of the group here with us today. And so trying to mitigate threat, or how do I protect from that, or navigate it? Should I have some kind of breach, hopefully not, or some type of compromise or unwanted system access. And then there's even natural disasters, that just, it can impact the physical availability of systems or processes of, where people go to work or anything like that. And so the reasons are wide of why a plan, you would need a plan like that. But I think some of the drivers of that is, like we said, security. I need to make sure that I have as much active protection around mitigating threats as possible, or I know what to do should a compromise happen. So there's a security element. There's just best practices, right? Data sensitive IP. We want to make sure that we have good protection around that. And then there's compliance. So a lot of the major frameworks, we heard a large chunk of the group talk about that. Really, I'm kind of being mandated in some way, either from an organizational standpoint or really from these compliance frameworks, whether it is PCI you're trying to adhere to, right, the DSS, or a high trust, or any of those frameworks that say you either need this, or to really be, a best practice around this, you should. And so, I think then a good area for us to kind of get into, and I want to hear your thoughts about this as well, is there a place to start? Like, I have all these things to consider. Are there frameworks that can guide me? Like, what are how should I first start thinking about this?
Yeah. I think, in our dialogue, when we were thinking about, hey, how thematically do we want to shape this discussion? That's what we both agreed is really the hardest part. Whether you're an organization that already has a policy and a plan and a disaster preparedness architecture and approach, or you're really in a place where you're revisiting, almost starting from scratch and creating something new. The hardest part is, to your point, Ryan, where do you start? And my thought is that it's good to begin with a foundation or a baseline, something that you can use as sort of a framework or a guide or even a lens through which to look through. And Leah, if you'd advance to the next slide. One of the most popular frameworks, particularly from a security perspective, because I think that's the angle that Ryan and I are most focused on when it comes to a compliance and a recovery and a resiliency strategy, is that security aspect. And there's a little bit of setup that we'll get to in just a minute that I'll articulate the why of that. But the CIA TRIAD is a pretty long-standing security policy and sort of recovery and compliancy framework that many organizations have used to give them a guidepost, if you will, on all of the different topical areas that they would need to, as an organization, review and look at and ensure that we've got the best people, process, and technology for each of those different pillars. So for example, confidentiality. I mean, obviously in today's era where application services and e-data is how effectively companies monetize their services, right? It's also a big part of how they are competitive. Our ability to be flexible and capable as it relates to the kind of technological services we can offer as a company puts us in a differentiation amongst the market. So we're always looking for something to prove there. So how we keep the sanctity or the confidentiality of that information so that we ensure that whether it's customer information or our own internal intellectual property, it's not able to be accessed by unauthorized persons, individuals, or what have you. Sort of loosely related is the next pillar, which is integrity, which is maintaining the data lifecycle, right, of the information, ensuring that not only do you have compliancy policies which govern this is how information life cycles itself, either through tools or process or what have you, but you have mechanisms that you can report, analyze, and show as evidence that in fact those things are occurring, right? In
Right.
this sort of cyber, attack landscape era that we're living in, there's a lot of auditing that goes on that companies
Absolutely.
have to adhere to because, from a B2B perspective, I don't know if I feel comfortable about doing business with you if you don't have some governance and some things that we can both agree on and that is defensible and you can improve. So integrity is really a big piece there. And then the last one, and probably nearer and dearer to Ryan and I's heart, is the tactical aspects of the technology, the architectures, and the design principles that you use to maintain and assure availability. That is that your services are maintaining the absolute most uptime, even in the face of a cyber threat. Your ability to recover quickly and safely is also key, because what's clear is in some regards, it's not necessarily a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And being ready for that moment with the right technological capabilities, solutions, people, and process is really key. Ryan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it being in the security and compliance space like Armor is, we have these conversations with our customers all the time, and it is about understanding. And we'll get into it a little bit more, but identifying the key areas, right, that you need to protect, and going about it with a strategy that says. And I agree. I like this framework of it. Helps you understand, do I have the right sort of checks and balances in place? Am I putting the effort in the right places to know that I've covered my bases as I'm thinking through that plan?
Right. Excellent. All right, Leah, I think we can advance. So as Ryan and I were dialoguing again on the thematic material, we wanted to give an example, something that sets the tone for the why of revisiting or perhaps starting from anew your resiliency plan, your recovery plan. I think the thing that's interesting about ransomware, in fact, there was a very notable attack in the public sphere last night with a healthcare organization. And when this happens in healthcare, especially during this time with the other pandemic that's going on, that has real world impacts. That's patient care. That's people's lives that are impacted when key systems like EMR and imaging and radiological and what have you aren't available. And the thing I think, Ryan, is unique about ransomware is that it does this thing that not only has to do with or attacks the primary application, that sort of production landscape of the application or service that the business produces, but it also gets the backups. So not only do I have the primary data, but I have the copy data. Right. And that sort of sets up the backdrop for the ransom, because the attacker now says, I've got you. Right. You can't go back to backup and recover. And I've compromised and encrypted your primary systems. The only way out is to pay. And that's why the FBI is tabulating that roughly $1 billion in ransoms will be paid in the year to come. And roughly every 11 seconds, some type of ransomware-based or ransomware-like cyber attack is occurring. That is staggering. So I think now more than ever, that's why, to our points at the beginning of the discussion, the defense in depth is so key. And the layer of that, cake, if you will, that's so important to me, obviously, is that backup and recovery layer. Because if you think about it, in the defense of depth, that's the last line of defense. So if I could have a system that ensures that it is in fact tamper-proof, that is impervious to such an attack, that at least gives me the sanctity of knowing that if all else fails, I could bring it back. Any thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think in ransomware, it's a great topic. We see it in the news. I know it's a concern that a lot of organizations have, particularly when you work with the types of data we've been talking about, healthcare, patient data, from a PCI standpoint, card data, business financial transaction information. And, the cybersecurity threat, and we, talk about it all the time here, is it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. And so the concern for a lot of organizations is that strategies that worked yesterday, are they still going to work tomorrow, or am I having to constantly, chase that? And so I think, to your point, understanding which of your layers you can have more kind of foundational protection within, and know that I do feel confident in that layer, as I move kind of through my plan, can add to that peace of mind, which is ultimately what you're after: mitigating risk and feeling confident in your plan.
100%. Leah, next slide. Thank you. So let's double click on this a little bit. And we're using that ransomware attack as our foundation here. Why are organizations paying? Which I think speaks to an organization's overall preparedness for when this type of cyber disaster strikes.
That's right.
Number one is that if we've arrested the copy data and we've also arrested the production data, we're down. And we know that organizations today, companies today, in the era of the world that we live in, with the importance of applications and services to doing business, companies monetize seconds, right? Just a kind of I don't know about you, Ryan, but I just kind of, in my mind, when I'm trying to quantify the cost of downtime, because some organizations haven't done that analysis, you say, okay, well, what's your gross annual revenue? To divide that by 365, and if you want to take it a step further, divide that by 24, sure. And then you've got a sense of, on a day or hourly basis, what the cost of downtime equates to, because there is a cost. And I think that the first one there, the lengthy downtime, you just reach that point break. I can't be down anymore, or otherwise we start thinking about closing the doors. The average time, as it has been studied, is about 7.3 days, according to Forrester. So that's significant. For large organizations, that could mean millions upon millions, or even billions of dollars in productivity and revenue losses. The next one is, they simply can't come back, right? So irrespective of the downtime, their backups have also been compromised, to the point earlier. So what choice really is there at that point? And then the last piece is, which I think is another key element, is the visibility. I don't know what the scope of the damage is. I don't know what patient zero is. I don't know where the attack came from. I don't know when it started. I'm not sure how much has been attacked. I'm unclear on what the problem statements are, or what the real landscape of what's happened to me is. So there's this moment of, all right, well, where do I even begin? And I think that, based on the third parties that have studied this is why organizations are just defaulting to, please, just give me my data back, whatever it takes. Ryan, what are you seeing, and what's your take here?
Yeah, this does, a lot of it goes back to, as you said, Jason, revenue impact. And to your point, some organizations, right, depending on the nature of what they do, seconds is critical, maybe hours, maybe days, but at the end of it, all time is going to mean something to, top line, and as well as just their own productivity and things like that. And so, and it is multifaceted, because an organization, you tend to think about the applications, the services that you render, and the sensitivity of that data, which is urgent, no doubt. There's other parts of data, right, that the business relies upon, depending on how you leverage those services and where you host that data and things like that, from financial records to just other, supporting, corporate files within the business, things like that, that are stored in a myriad of places. And so understanding scope and, right, where do I have this, what has connectivity to what? And so, customers that tend to be part of those compliance focused frameworks are a lot of times driven to understand more about that, because they're having to evidence and provide that on an ongoing basis. But when you're not, sometimes those are exercises that you unfortunately get put into a reactive state of, now I'm having to do this assessment because I didn't do it ahead of time, And
that's when the real trouble begins, because not only does it expose you or your company that you don't really have a strategy to address this, but it almost assuredly means you're going to pay the ransom in the case of ransomware.
Right, that's right.
Great point. And I think we're now going into a second poll question. So we encourage everyone to select one of the options.
Okay.
Okay, mixed
So it looks
responses.
looks to me like we've got folks are like, hey, we've got a good foundation, seems to be the majority, but we'd like to
Yep.
make some refinements. We're looking for some improvements.
All right, so now we'll get into, a little bit about, and we've been alluding to it, but how do I go about? So we talked about frameworks and stuff, but really what goes into a business continuity plan, and you'll hear about, a business impact analysis and things of how do I assess what I should care about, what I maybe need to care less about, or, in some cases maybe not care much about at all. But there's a few key areas that we generally talk about in terms of that assessment. And first is obviously understanding priority of where your most critical assets are, your most critical data, where are the key points that you say, this is the most crucial to our business. If it was, unavailable, compromised in some way, if it was leaked, something like that, understanding that to help you kind of grade or tier, how do I bucket, things that I want to go about protecting? Because ultimately this comes back to, it's an insurance policy, like we talked about, it's a cost item that I have to spend, but just like you would evaluate that for anything else in life, of making sure that you have adequate protection, but also that you're not overspending, or underspending. And so that's where scope becomes key, to the next point of, and that's to your point, Jason, that you made recently, which is about understanding in the event of a compromise or a disaster or some type like that, how do you know what could have been impacted, what needs to be checked, what are the most critical things that need to be brought back online or made available most quickly? And then, so that goes into your scoping assessment. Speed, of course, you'll talk a lot about RTO, recovery time objective, RPO, recovery point objective, and that's really assessing how quickly do I need those systems back online? And that kind of ties in again to the priority of them, but that recovery time of what is the amount of time that I can afford or withstand to be down? And then recovery point is about how much data could I afford to lose? So if I had a period of time where transactions are just lost, what does that mean to me as an organization based off of what this application does or its role within my organization? Because ultimately that's going to depend on how much you're investing in a solution around that. Because a lot of this is solved with technology of, I'm taking backups, how frequently, how long am I storing them? Do I need multiple hot copies of the data? Do I just need this available in archive, cold storage somewhere, so that I don't need it super quick, but I do need it, if called upon. And so, but it's okay if it takes me a couple days to go get that versus, no, I need this within seconds or minutes, or now all of a sudden it's becoming too damaging to my business. Which speaks a little bit to the scalability aspect, where we talk about, do I need redundant copies of information, geographically dispersed, what does that need to look like, which feeds into some of that RTO conversation of how quickly I can bring it back online, what's the scope of my budget, because I understand how much I'm having to protect, what's my overall spend going to be towards a protection plan like this. Ultimately leading me to, right, the poll that we just talked about is, how confident, what is that peace of mind that I now have, excuse me, in my plan? Because it's that plan that you're going to fall back on in the event of disaster, because it gets stressful, right? It's a difficult time for any organization to navigate through. And so saying, I have a run book, here are the plays that I execute, we've practiced it, we've rehearsed it, and now I know what to fall back on. But it takes all parts of the organization, like we've talked about, because it's, the needs stretch outside of just what IT is doing or what service you're running to a customer. It truly is organization wide. So any thoughts there, Jason?
Yeah, 100%. When we were talking, we agreed that it's a team sport. Operations, infrastructure, security, finance. I mean, every aspect of any given business has to be aware of what their resiliency and recovery posture is. They also, to your point, have to be able to wait and prioritize applications and services. They need to have robust communication plans such that if an event occurs, they know exactly who needs to know, at what point they need to know, whether that's internal or external, et cetera. There's so many aspects. And the thing I see many times in my travels it's a like kind of a bifurcated thing where you either have organizations who are backing up everything, right? Or you have organizations who are not backing up enough things. So you can tell there's really not a good litmus for what's important versus what's not. And my heart goes out to the infrastructure teams, because I think, at least in my view, what happens is that the infrastructure team is forced to have to make the decision because the business hasn't given them that guidance. So that's where it goes back to. It's absolutely a marriage between all those teams, because there's policy, there's people, and then there's technology. I think the other thing is how, to your point, the more intelligence you can have in things like recovery versus retention. You brought this up in the middle there. I thought that was a huge point, because I see that too. You know, there's the idea that I need to retain data for compliancy reasons, but then there's this idea that I need to resume this application to monetize whatever it is my service is, right? And that you can spend time and thought on separating those two things and finding technologies that give you easy ways to do just that, right?
Right.
And I think coming out of this, so this is kind of that macro view. Now we apply what I would consider a security lens on top of all this, because I think, you know, based on our discussion today and based on what's happening in the market, I think that's one of the most important aspects of what we're looking at. So Leo, if you would go to the next slide, please. So I think that, you know, time and thought on, hey, do we have the best security framework that meets our organization's needs, our governance, our regulatory requirements, et cetera, in the best way possible? You know, we certainly have to manage the constraints, what people we have on staff, what our knowledge domains are, budget, et cetera. But a lot of these things are more policy and people, less technology. There are some exceptions, right? And the one that I go to right away on the list is immutability, immutable file system. So now I'm going to bring kind of us back to the end state, or the last line of defense, you know, the place that's applicable to myself and Ryan, and that is the backup systems. Obviously, in the ransomware world, when the copy data is compromised, it means exactly that where the backup data was stored was not immutable, and the data could be tampered with. And that really is the core definition of immutability, something that cannot be altered or tampered with. And I think the sanctity of knowing that my backups are protected in that framework is absolutely key, and what we would consider today a best practice. So if you're going and doing a reevaluation of your recovery posture and your backup and recovery tool set, that would be the first thing I would look at. The other thing I would look at is, do I have a mechanism to address bad actors in the organization? So for example, do I have a strategy, a policy, a process, and then a tool to ensure that there's roles-based authentication control or access control around the various aspects of my, you know, data storage, my data protection, et cetera, right? Whether that's in the backup and recovery layer or somewhere else, this notion that people are given the capability to do the things that are consistent with their job function and nothing else. And then technologies like retention lock, which would in fact prevent that bad actor from trying to remove or delete critical information, even if they had the access to do that, right? And I won't go on every point, but you see that if we apply that security lens to our strategy, it's really important that we're evaluating all of these places, looking for our gaps and finding ways to improve. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think security is a big piece of this, because I think a lot of times when you talk about business continuity and DR, you know, disaster recovery mechanisms and all that, sometimes the conversation shifts to what you do when something bad has happened. But if you can prevent a lot of that, be more proactive, have a lot of those safety measures in place up front, it can prevent a lot of the rest of your plan from even needing to be invoked, right? And so I think a lot of this too, because, you know, for a lot of organizations,
great point,
right? Any of this downtime, they have SLAs that they're trying to render to their end customers. And so protecting those, because a lot of times it's in a competitive landscape where SLAs become a big key of, them delivering uptime, they're delivering application availability and service availability to their customers. And so anything you can do to mitigate, now I have to rely on RTO and where would I invest here and how quickly I can get those systems online, providing that protective, layer up front is awesome.
100%. I like that point you made, because if in fact I've got the right framework that is adhering to the industry recognized best practices as they exist today, I don't need to invoke. I've prevented an incident, and I think that's the catbird seat. That's where we all want to be. Leah, you can advance the slide. So we included just to kind of get some thoughts started for the audience around, hey, have I evaluated these things? I always think it's a great idea to quarterly review these things, a meeting with the infrastructure team, the operations team, the security team to say, hey, are we doing the best we can as it relates to protection against system resets, bad actors? How is our logging doing? Do we have a physical site security that we're all comfortable with, et cetera? Just really making sure that across teams we're all checked off and we've got that synchronicity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Leah, if you want to advance the slide. So if we bring it all together, really focused on that recovery layer, because we used the ransomware example earlier on, which I think is one of the most prevalent type of cyber breach that you can have today. It's really all about sort of putting it all together, like Ryan talked about, the definition, the policy creation, the sort of getting a sense of the what, and that is, what are my critical services? Where does revenue come from? How quickly do they need to be back online? And then what are those systems? What are their application dependencies and mappings? And then I need a system to protect all of that information, right? In particularly for the critical ones, in the lowest recovery time objective possible. Immutability, ensuring that in fact nothing is alterable as it relates to the copy data. The sanctity of knowing that if I took a backup, it is forever that point in time, and ransomware can't get its mitts on it. And then lastly, technologies and strategies that will actually analyze the copy data periodically over time to look for patterns. You've heard of this concept called AI, artificial intelligence, ML, machine learning. If we can inject those kinds of things to look for patterns and identify suspicious activity within the copy data, or even, hey, there's data in this application that there shouldn't be, that's another step that we can take to try to proactively prevent an incident from occurring.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree.
Awesome.
So I think when we summarize a lot of this, thinking about the key points, there is a lot of drivers that go into why I would want this, but the real benefits that you can take away from it is a lot of the areas that we've highlighted. So I can be predictable, right? That's one of the key outcomes of a plan, is that should something bad happen, I know what to do so that I have a predictable way of getting back online and get my business functioning again. If I am being mandated or governed by one of the frameworks or adhering to one of the major compliance frameworks, I can be confident that I'm meeting the needs of what I need to do as part of that governance or that assessment. And then really the intangibles like we've talked about is and it kind of goes back to that peace of mind. There's things outside of what you might owe to a framework or things like that. There's other parts of the business that help know it's the other areas that get impacted by a disaster and that's why we say it's more than just tools or technologies and things like that. It's people disruption that happen, and things get displaced and activities within the business come to a halt while attention gets focused on mitigating the disaster. And so a lot of that is an intangible piece that it's hard to quantify up front, that if my business had to divert all focus on recovering for something like this, right, what was that opportunity cost? What did I lose the ability to focus on, or what other things needed to be happening and stuff like that. So it really gives you, which is why I think it all comes back to predictability, and it is that insurance plan like we've spoken about.
100%. And I don't think we can stress enough that it really is that team sport. Everybody in the organization has some element of responsibility, either to help prevent disasters by following process and procedures, implementing technologies, looking for gaps and identifying solutions to address them. And then certainly everyone has a responsibility to be part of the response when they do occur, and I think as we've talked about, that last line of defense that we all have to depend on is do we have the data to bring back? Because if that's compromised too, that's a real bad day, and certainly is going to cost the organization not only perception but as well money.
That's right. All right, so I'll spend a little time talking about. So now let's chat a little bit about where Armor and Rubrik intersect on this. And Jason, you've been alluding to it throughout the conversation here. But so Armor, as a security and compliance focused platform, we have a portion of our customers that run also in our private cloud. And so within that, that's an area where we also focus on. We have a marketplace of different tools and technologies that can be leveraged to help customers meet the outcomes that they're looking for, including around putting together a business continuity plan for whatever they're running within Armor's cloud. And so what I really love about the Rubrik solution is because, backup, it's almost a guaranteed, conversation with any customer or prospect that we talk through that backup is on their mind, right? I need to have a way to recover data for any of the number of reasons that we've spoken about this afternoon. And so what I love about the Rubrik solution is, like I spoke about before, it's an insurance policy. This is not an area that it's an important area for organizations to focus their time on, but it's not what moves the business forward, right? It's not where they want to spend their time around innovation, driving revenue, things like that. And so making it easy is a key area for us, because we don't want it to be a cumbersome task that now I'm in the weeds of setting up technical systems and doing all these things. And so what I love about the solution with Rubrik is, it's flexible. And so from a cost perspective, right, customers in our portal, as they're provisioning infrastructure, it's easy with a few clicks to say, I want to protect this entire server, everything on it. To your point, scope is everything on here is critical. And or I only need to store, backup bits and pieces of it. Maybe there's critical files on a server. Maybe there's, that I need to keep longer. Like, I need to be able to roll this whole thing back very quickly within the span of the last few days. But if I'm talking about long-term retention of data, I assess that there's really some key areas of data within this server that I need. Rubrik gives us the flexibility to offer to our customers, do any combination of that you want. And it's easy to set up. And so one of the things that I love about your platform is it was super easy for us to integrate with. We try to provide a seamless of experience for our customers so they can get in and do what they need to, again, get back to focusing on their business, right? And so it's an area that we've been super happy with, and with being able to offer that service, and it's a fantastic platform.
That is so awesome to hear, Ryan. I think the other thing that to me that struck me the most about what our Armor and Rubrik were able to do together is to leverage Rubrik's RESTful API. So just kind of an FYI, every aspect of the Rubrik solution set is addressable by this API. And where that got really exciting for you all is you were able to create this sort of dashboard as it relates to customer data protection, customer recovery, visibility into the copy data to try to identify patterns and anomalous behavior, self-service capabilities. I mean, I think that's another aspect that we probably didn't give enough justice to, which is if we can introduce as much automation into this process where we're mitigating that human error element, right? Or that possibility that something breaks down in the human aspect of a disaster procedure, then the better we'll all be for it. I think for us together, that's one of the coolest aspects of bringing our firms together to create a combined solution to delight customers is that we can take a lot of the guesswork out of it together, but as well, we can ensure that, hey, that human element, it's all automated That's not anything that you've really got to worry about. And then I love the self-service capability. Give the end user the autonomy to do their recoveries, but in a very easy and logical way.
Right. Yeah, that's an area that we really talk about a lot, because whether it's getting a security implementation, you're making sure that your workloads are protected or whatever the case may be, or your servers are backed up, allowing organizations to build that into their automation chain so that there's not we forgot to configure backups on that service. We forgot to run, install security tooling on said workload or whatever the case may be. So that is an area of focus that we talk about all the time, is how do we help enable customers to make this just an integral part of how they do business or how they provision 100%. Infrastructure, applications, whatever the case may be. So it's not that afterthought that they need to be concerned with. So totally agree.
Right.
So I think to kind of tie it up here is, again, like we talked about, defense in depth, as the name implies, a business continuity plan, it's multifaceted, it's multi-layered, it's organization-wide. We really just dug into a few pieces here, but I think that the business impact assessment, understanding truly across your organization, those scoping exercises, understanding what's critical and where it is, and what each of, assigning values and criticality to what those mean to your business is key. The extent to which you can provide those security layers, provide that mitigation protection up front, you're all the better off for it. And then when we do have to talk about tools, and architecture and things like that, it does matter at the end of the day what you select to use and what technology you use to protect your data. Because to your point, Jason, what we do love about the Rubrik platform is that it is immutable. You've built a system in such a way to say that I know that as my data is backed up, it will stay that way. And I have a static known good state that I can roll back to and be back online in an instant, through a few clicks. So,
couldn't agree more with you. The devil is certainly in the details, and, making sure that you understand the industry sort of concepts like immutability and retention lock and RBAC and all of those things, I think will help you guide or help you as a guide make more judicious decisions about which architecture to choose, which one is the right one for you, because they meet those requirements. As an FYI to the audience, Rubrik is going to be doing an event very similar to this one next week, where we're going to be talking about the future of risk management and why that data recovery and backup and recovery landscape is so important in this kind of new cyber attack landscape. But I'll just be honest. I mean, I think the distillation of that is really what this combined merger between Rubrik and Armor are doing, is we're looking at all aspects of the data lifecycle and ensuring that if there are gaps, whether it's speed of recovery, flexibility on recovery, insights into the data, that we've built solutions, people and processes to address them. So I'm really looking forward to that dialogue.
Yeah, should be a great discussion for sure.
100%.
Excellent. What a great conversation today from Ryan and Jason, with advice on what to consider when you're updating or creating your business continuity plan, especially to expect the unexpected. So if you have any other questions, definitely put them into the chat box, and we'd like to answer them during the Q&A session. You can also find the resources here for more information. And we, as you're putting your questions in, or want to reach out to us after, and if you haven't already submitted them, you can use the right-hand panel. And I want to ask all of you to participate in just a quick survey that will be sent after the broadcast, where you can provide us with feedback, or if you think about a question after the event, you can submit those as well in the post-broadcast survey as you rate our webinar for the day. If you'd like to attend other upcoming events, go ahead and sign up at armor.com events. With that said, we'll see if we've got any questions.
Awesome.
I think we had a couple from folks that have asked us to follow up with them, so we will go ahead and do that after. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you to Jason and Ryan for your time and expertise today.
Thanks, Leah. Yeah, and thank you to everyone taking time out of your afternoon. I know Jason said it at the start. I know everyone has a lot going on right now, a lot to choose from in terms of how you fill time with webinars and things like that. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually,
thank you so much for coming, and please feel free to attend next week's session as well.
Yes, one question though, that's a pretty good one I did want to catch as it just came in for both of you.
Absolutely, let's do it.
How does Armor and Rubrik's offering differentiate from AWS, Azure, and Google plans?
Got it. From differentiate in terms of, so I think for Armor solution, for our customers that run in our cloud, it really is tailored around ease of setup and ease of ongoing use. So we do offer a couple flexible ways of how you protect your servers, that run in our cloud. Rubrik, as a platform, has a ton of functionality that we've kind of scratched the surface on to date. And so the key areas right now that we provide in terms of functionality to customer is around, as I'm managing my infrastructure, my VMs, if you will, my virtual machines, of ease of setup of I can quickly configure backups of the entire server, or server could have 4 disks and I only need to back up data on 2 of those. And so again, providing some cost flexibility there, as well as also saying from those backups, I can even go in and just quickly restore files from direct from within the portal. I can jump into Armor's portal and say I want to push this file from this backup onto my server as a copier to overwrite the file. So restore is quite quick, with their process as well. So the way I think about it is flexibility in terms of scope of what you back up and a cost-efficient way of doing that. So it's all consumption-based. We know that the needs ebb and flow of what a customer has to back up. And so being able to opt in and out of that service as you need and just pay for what you consume has been a nice way of delivering that, instead of having to over provision infrastructure footprint, large blocks of storage to have to serve as like a backup target or things like that. So that's how I would describe the offering in a nutshell.
Yeah, my take here is that there's more than just a manual. That I think to me is the biggest value add that Armor will provide is help, right? Actual people who will seek to understand your business, your constraints, your objectives, your goals, etc., and then deliver a solution that's sort of custom built for that. The public cloud is you got to come prepared with that, right? Or you have to engage a third party in order to try to distill all the terminology, the concepts, the architectural covenants, what have you. Now, certainly Rubrik can fit there just as easily, but to me, the value add is there's somebody or some buddies at Armor who are guiding you on, hey, this is based on your requirements and needs, this is the appropriate solution. And I'm going to abstract from you how all of the sausage is made, if you will, right? Whereas in the public cloud, you have to have a very keen sense of what a VPC is, how to build IAM policies. So there's a lot of acumen that you have to have. That to me is the biggest value, is that they just truly make it easy to consume it as a service.
Totally agree.
Excellent, thank you. And then another question, could you both comment on the differences between business continuity and disaster recovery?
Of course, I'll start there. So when I think of continuity, it's as the name implies, that is service resumption, right? So if there's a blip, whether it's a hard down or just a segment of a given service, right? How do I ensure that that service resumes as quickly as possible, or that there is no noticeable impact to the service at all, right? It also talks about the people and the processes around responding to such an event to ensure that continuity is maintained. In other words, who do we need to communicate to, right? Are there alternative mechanisms that we would point end users or customers to in the event that we cannot resume that particular service? So the focus and the goal of continuity is just that, to ensure that capability as it relates to the revenue generating applications and services that my business provides is never diminished and is consistent throughout. And then when it comes to disaster recovery, well, that's when all of those continuity availability mechanisms have failed, and now you have to go to backup. Right? Now you have to go to the copy data to resurrect either everything in a given location or a particular application or services or suite of them. And that's, to me, the difference, right? As in the continuity would imply some sort of scalability, resiliency in the architecture that would allow, as well as the people and process element that allow a particular service or services to continue, hence continuity. Whereas recovery is, well, throw that out the window. We've had a disaster and the only way back is from backup. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I agree with your assessment, Jason. When I think of continuity, it is more in the planning and the way in which an organization keeps moving, and or recovers from. So it's a lot of that planning effort and making sure that I can minimize downtime, minimize impact to keep the business going, just as you said. And when I think of disaster recovery, you fall back to more of the systems, IT infrastructure of how do I get the systems back so that my continuity plan can pick up from there to say, okay, we're back online, we're in the green. Now it's time to move forward, because there's going to be other processes that are kicking in to help everything sort of reset and reestablish. But Yep, agree. That's how I generally classify the two.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you both so much.
Great
And
questions.
I think with that, the time, yes, they were. The time is come to an end. But again, I want to thank Jason and Ryan for the time today and for all of you attending.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.